Okay, here's the second little screencast I'm putting together. This one focuses on the second part of the experience. So again, the fall, the extended practicum is a separate experience, though you are signing up for both. Why I say it's a separate experience is they're two discrete locations. They're two, I think, quite discrete kinds of experiences. The fall being much more of a traditional practicum placement, however, over a longer period of time. Whereas the winter, the alternative placement is something that you choose yourself with support from me in identifying and securing the placement. So in both cases, just so you know, I failed to mention the prior screencast that the main communication tool, which is for you to access and routinely monitor, is Pepper. It just seems like a good spot. So for example, in the extended practicum, this again is the fall one. Let's just see. This is where I set the communications. People, let me just see, individualized folder. So there's some announcements, that I did across the planning time. This occurred across the fall, just little reminders, much in the way that you received during practicum. There were some key documents around the schedule, the learning plan, the health and safety, all the usual stuff. And then there were also individualized folders. So all the people who participated last year, I set up their individual folder where there was just communications back and forth around where they, would post their health and safety. They'd give me little updates. They'd post their extended practicum calendar. So this is one-on-one communication, centralized, so you didn't have to worry about it getting lost in your email. But the focus of this one, so that's the extended practicum, the focus of this screencast is to be on the alternate placement. So again, set up a community for us to centralize conversations. The getting started note gives you a sense of what happened last year. So in here I just emphasize the importance of that finding a good placement takes time. You have to really think, okay, so I've had by this point 3 practica, one being extended, 2 routine ones. How else do I want to supplement my learning opportunities? And this is for you really to, with me, collaborate on identifying what works best for your learning and perhaps your career opportunities. So take some time, take some thought. Some people were interested in special ed settings, some were interested in outdoor facilities, some were more interested in kind of a community agency. So maybe it could be in an NGO that does educational work. So it all has to do with education, but maybe not within the regular school setting. That being said, some people went to alternative schools, and of course, of the 17, 7 went internationally as well. And so what happens is that you think of where it is you want to go. You communicate back and forth with me. Just waiting for this to delay. And there's a whole, again, there's some partnership documents in terms of trying to secure a place. You have to make sure that there's an agreement. There are certain requirements from the University of Toronto that that are required. And in terms of brainstorming ideas, again, I've got an old listing of internships, and I think there are something like 100 plus internships which are available through this link to give you a sense of, oh, this is something I might be interested in. You would be contacting them on your own. I prepared a letter. Again, I'll update and amend it, but you would send them out a letter, and explain, contacting the organization, who you are, what you're interested in volunteering, why you've contacted them, give them some sense of the timelines as well. And I think, you would send them a email first, followed up quickly by a phone call to try to establish some kind of personal rapport. I think all sorts of personal networking goes on, obviously, as well. Similarly, for those with international placement interests, there was some, I provided a listing at that point in time, so that was about a year ago, of what I thought might be possible. Some in China and Hong Kong. There was connections in India. No one wanted to pursue that. There were some in the UK. Again, not much interest pursuing there. I think now I'm pretty confident I can get some places in Belgium, the Netherlands, and Germany. As well as additional ones in China. But really, and Costa Rica at that time. That wasn't on my horizon, but that was an excellent one, which I think will will go forward as well. Anyway, so you can see there's a place to communicate back and forth the interests, and each person again had their own folder. Now you'll see that there's only 4 people here, and that's because many people opted, who are opting for the alternative placement, actually opted for the community engaged learning course. So I'm just going to go to the slideshow, which was about that course, provide you with some information that was provided to the teacher candidates last year. Again, we'll meet again. This is just an overview. So community engaged learning, at that session I gave an overview of it. This is an elective in the winter. So you can do your alternative placement and not be part of the elective. Of the 17 who did the alternative placement, 14 decide to take the community engaged learning course. I think their rationale was, well, I'm already doing a 3 to 4 week placement somewhere, either locally or internationally. Why don't I make that the focus of my elective course as well? And there were other people in the community engaged learning course who were other cohorts, and they were doing it for a lesser period of time. So this was an information session for all, and explain what community engaged learning is. I explained the field placement process, the criteria, and the university requirements, and a little bit on the course. So, explain community engaged learning, what it is. Many of you are familiar with an example of that because you've done some service learning, which is an example of community engaged learning. Basically, it's an experiential learning model that benefits both students, that'd be you, and the community partners. Some people opted for areas that were connected to their MTRP. Some were more interested in finding placements that were more career-oriented. And the key words in community engaged learning are, as it says, they're reciprocity, reflection, and individually directed. Imagine adults choosing what they want to learn for themselves. Okay, so how come we're not going down there? That is kind of interesting. There we go. So criteria. So yes, self-selected, but you do need my approval prior to the start of the course. So the course begins in January. That's when the elective courses for term 2 will begin. And you need to identify well in advance what it is that you wish to do, because it takes some time to find the placement, confirm the placement, get the paperwork sort of sorted out. So again, that's true for any of the alternative placements, including those who choose to participate in the community engaged learning course. So all the placements are to be voluntary. You may receive a stipend that supports it, but it's not paid employment. By pursuing paid employment during the alternative placement, it really does change the nature, both of the learning experience and the kinds of things that you choose. So I'm happy to talk with you about the rationale there, but they are to be voluntary, not paid employment. Now you'll notice it's a minimum of 35 hours, and that's because that was for teacher candidates and other cohorts. 35 hours in the placement where you're actively engaged with a school or the community partner. But for those of you who are in the UTS cohort, you're actually looking to complete a placement a minimum of 90 to 110 hours. So that's essentially you're looking at 3 to 4 weeks of a full-time kind of placement, like a practicum placement in that same practicum block in the winter. The criteria for the course were you need to have a placement that connects to the notions of global citizenship and or eco-justice education. That's broadly, both of those areas are quite broadly defined, so I think that no one had any challenges making those connections. You need to assure that you have a site supervisor, someone from the organization, be it the school, community agency, or international school partner, who can provide you with some kind of guidance, support, and administrative supervision. That's the go-between me and them. And that the location meets the health and safety requirements commensurate with Ontario workplace standards. Again, that's interesting that this just doesn't really, oh, there we go. So the university requirements. So internationally, meaning that, so let's say if you're interested in going to, say, Costa Rica or Shanghai or something next year during the winter practicum block, you will need to register with Safety Abroad office. You'll need to attend a pre-departure orientation session. You'll have to explore if there are any additional costs for travel health insurance. Typically, you're well covered under the Graduate Student Union Health Plan, but depends on where you're traveling, and that you can only travel to countries that are level 1 or level 2 risk countries. None of you, I think, are going to be engaged in research activities, which requires that you go into an emergency area, say like a Syria or any number of high conflict zones. China right now, I think, is category 2. So you're pretty well covered for most parts of the world where you're going to want to go anyway, but that's one of the requirements for the university placements. So just to give you a sense, there are additional processes and paperwork that need to be attended to. It's all part of that organizational prowess. Very slow running there, so let's just be patient. There we go. So you've decided that you wanted to do the alternative and extended practicum. You've had your extended practicum during that time frame. You've thought about where you want to go. You've set it up, and now you're saying, oh, do I want to partake in the course or not? So for those who took the course, this is the way it largely operated last year. You have your placement secure prior to the start of January 2018. And that was true for everyone, whether they're in the UTS cohort or not. We met, in fact, only this, I think, was a plan. They were going to meet like 6 times. I think we met 4 times face-to-face. Then there was some online meeting where people actually contributed to 3 sessions, not 2 sessions, and that took place over a period of 6 weeks. And then we met together at the end, and we had a couple of face-to-face sessions where the task was, or where we just watched people's digital stories. So you'll get lots more details should you choose this path. I'm just trying to give you an overview, and it seems to be a very slow process in wanting to go to the next slide for some reason. Let me just escape. Sorry for that interruption. Just going back now to a little bit more information about the Community Engaged Learning course. Again, so you've completed your extended practicum. You've opted by doing so to also participate in the alternative placement. And I'm just going to pop in here. This is the course community for this last January to April period. And you'll see in here in the archive that much in the same way, there are partnership documents to help you identify your placement forms and the whole placement planning process. Anyone, again, who partook in the course, I set up an individual folder and they simply communicated with me what their intentions and plans were, and that's where they posted their documents. So this person said, oh, I think I want to do a placement appeal, looked across from October into December. There seemed to be no contact that worked for her with an eco focus, and then so made a last minute decision in early January to be placed at the Beverly Street Public School here in Toronto. This person here, JC, she was in Rob Simon's English class when it was teachable, and her placement was connected to the research project connected to that course, where he connects his students to grade 7 and 8 alternative school, working on, she was quite interested in graphic novels and digital stories. So that's where the whole focus of that research project was on. Nadine, she was interested in China, then she was kind of, going all over the place to Dubai, Costa Rica, etc., etc. She ended up going to Hong Kong and China. Let's see. Danielle, she ended up going to Afrocentric school. Anyways, you get the sense. Each gets a folder. They're communicating back and forth. A lot of this depends on your own interest and volition, and I give you some feedback and suggestions of how to pursue. And the course assignments, goodness me, it's only April. I think you can wait to hear more about that, but there's basically 4 dimensions to it. One is there's a placement proposal in which you need to not just secure the placement, but you do a tracking sheet as well as you complete an annotated bibliography. You choose the course readings or the readings for your placement that support your inquiry. There's a field placement blog, which you're familiar with from this past year. This is the main focus of the course, though, and I think that was perhaps the fantastic reading. And there was much more participation than you experienced this last year in reading and respond to each other's blogs. And then the last one were some digital stories, and everyone produced a story that we do a workshop on how to create a digital story, give you some guidelines, and some were more skilled than others, obviously, but people managed to put together some really neat little videos. 2 to 5 minutes was the length, and that was their culminating task. Anyway, that gives you a bit of a broad overview, and maybe perhaps more detail than you needed, on the alternative practicum. So again, if you opt into this alternative extended, you do the extended in the fall, you do the alternative in the winter. The alternative is you choose the location. I support you to secure the required documents, and you can, within the alternative placement, choose to do just the placement and on top of that do a different elective course, or you can choose to do the alternative placement and use the alternative placement for your elective course in the community engaged learning. Lots of detail, but gives you a bit of a sense. All right.